Welcome back, guys. We're going to do the next part. Talk to Mr. Tony. Now, when I mean he vetoes everything, I think he holds the record. I'm not 100% positive, but I think he had something like 400 vetoes during his time as president. Just a lot of reform. Guts a lot of the Republicans within the federal government. Replaces them with people that he trusts personally. Pretty much his entire presidency was the single most conservative presidency you're ever really going to have. Cleveland also came in as a bachelor, mind you, during his time at the White House. Gets married to Frances. I think he was a congressman's daughter. Ends up courting her with permission from the parents. They end up having, I think, 5 kids. I think they get married in the White House. I think he's the only president that actually gets married specifically at the White House. I'm not 100% positive. Oh, so you can actually improve your relationship with these people? Okay. And I remembered this one in particular because I think when Frances Cleveland, basically her new name, comes into the White House, she is the youngest first lady ever in the history of this country at like 22 years old. And she was also just a real fire starter, like just real passionate about everything. I gotta be honest, I don't care for games when they do stuff like this. Even if it's kind of interesting and cool, I'm personally just indifferent to it all.
Not everyone wants my advice, but they're gonna get it either way. See you around.
Hunter! Hunter. Just who I was hoping to see. I understand you've already been on the hunt with Blade, so you're aware of our unusual visitor on the
Why can't I
grounds?
leave?
Yes, we encountered something Blade called the Vargist.
His instincts were correct. I believe it is indeed the Vargest.
So I have to buy something?
Creating a facsimile of one.
Is the Abbey in danger?
Okay. Sure.
Not unless we provoke it. However, it seems to harness a dark magic similar to
Okay.
Corsa's
This game, okay,
I
sure.
need you to track this Vargest, capture it, and bring it to me here in the forge. But please, don't kill it. It's my hope that I can find a way to use its magics to break through the barrier to the lab.
After battling Hydra agents and Fallen, tracking a pup on the Abbey ground sounds like a vacation.
Do not let your guard down, Hunter. As I said, it's no ordinary dog, but a demonic entity. I suggest you bring Blade and Wolverine with you. I believe the portal will soon be at its apex.
They would have 5 children. I think their youngest, Francis, was born when like Cleveland was like almost near his deathbed. By the way, I think she lived all the way up until the 1990s, which I always find pretty interesting. It's like, oh, who was your dad? Oh, Grover Cleveland, president in the 1880s. Huh. I don't know. I always just find that pretty interesting.
No point in hiding it, Hunter. I already got a whiff of that demon dog you're after.
Wayne said I gave you two the slip the other night. I want in on the next run.
Perhaps that is what our hunt is missing. Your positive attitude.
Me? Positive? That's a new one. But I am.
Now, do understand that the subsequent election against Benjamin Harrison, that the entire time Grover Cleveland is in office, I mean, to a lot of people, it's a lot of newspapers, to how everyone perceived him. You know, he was like a bit of a hard ass, you know. I mean, the smart thing to do is to have less federal government in your lives, but ultimately, a lot of people wanted some real fundamental change, whether it is through federal policy, etc., etc. They just wanted their lives to be better and different. And a lot of people did see the federal government as a positive, in particular, you know, the more northeastern states. I will positively say that. Which becomes a bit of a contentious issue for Grover Cleveland, because that's largely how he won his first election.
That's right. If I went back there, I could probably pick it up. No sweat. So, I'll meet you there.
Can I talk to them?
Invite yourself along.
Bet your ass I did. I'll see you at the Folly tonight. See you at Hunter's Folly.
Okay. The big issues during this election, though, were more than just his government. It was about the economic realities that were facing a lot of people. They were tough times.
Business or pleasure?
Because Grover Cleveland was more about, we're going to lower the tariff rates so that we can have more imports and better goods from all across the world. And Republicans, smartly, I think, were against lowering tariff rates. Excuse me. They were more so about American industrialism and prominence and making things in America. So they were more for protectionist tariffs, which made things more expensive for international stuff, which caused some issues with Great Britain, a whole slew of things as a result of it eventually that I'll get to when I talk about Benjamin Harrison. But the election, again, just focused on the states that, because Republicans were very smart. They basically kind of teamed together and were like, look, these 4 states swung the election for us, and we need to win these 4 states back.
See you tonight at the Folly.
And ultimately what ends up happening is, in one of the first times in the history of this country, Grover Cleveland wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College, because they focused on those 4 states in particular, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, in Indiana. Although this election also, again, a lot of fraudulent votes within this this particular election. Let's just say.
Nico and Magic
I
careful
have to talk to Tony, but you're not letting me talk to Tony.
They are having a hard
Okay.
time letting her go.
Hunter, I need you to be straight with me. Are they planning another attempt?
Well, basically, he loses the election of 1888 and becomes a private citizen. And then the famous line by his wife, Frances, is basically, you know, I'm just going to say thank you. Let's make nice with everyone. She basically makes the claim, you know, take care of everything because we will be back. Which I always find pretty intense from a young mid-20s first lady. She makes the claim that they're going to be coming back within 4 years. Cleveland basically just goes back to law. Which, you know, gets them by. They have their first several children around this particular point in time.
I should go.
Meanwhile, Harrison's just kind of having a bit of a difficult presidency. Largely because of economic realities. I think
Did you keep the parchments located?
during his time as president, for Benjamin Harrison specifically, they reversed the gold standard. He was more about silver. I think the Sherman Silver Purchase thing, Sherman Silver Purchase Act of like 1890 was in full force and made things a lot more difficult financially for the nation. But a lot of people were very, very upset by what was going on, and specifically just the economic realities were hitting them pretty hard, despite protectionist tariffs. I mean, people's money was just being devalued little by little. That's just how it is, unfortunately, back then.
Blaze's well-being is not my responsibility. Now, is there anything else?
What if we remove the corruption somehow?
You already know the answer to that, which is why I suspect you just told me of Nico's plan. It's impossible.
Now that we know where the page is, it will not be long until Lilith finds it.
No.
So when the election of 1892 comes around,
Have you considered Lilith?
Grover Cleveland's name is thrown in the ring. He has the most name recognition, obviously,
She sold her
the most power, and despite having
Limited power.
not the greatest record, does have at the very least a pretty clear outline of
does not want to.
Are you actually feeling
of what
sorry
he wants to do and how he's gonna basically go about doing things. And I think a lot of people saw this for Grover Cleveland as like, okay, we know what we're getting, and at the very least, we're gonna just kind of go with it for the most part. Again, stopped again and pushed back by Tammany Hall, all these other individuals, specifically in New York. I think that was his main big opponent. Was
I have a favor to ask.
I forgot. It was one of the senators from New York who threw his hat in the ring and was backed by Tammany Hall. A whole coalition of Democrats effectively wanted to basically just have this guy as their main candidate. And I think, and you understand too, I think it's very different for so for conventional purposes, for Republican and Democrat conventions, I think for Republicans you just need a majority of votes. It's like 51%, and that's the nominee regardless. And Democrats, you need a 2/3, or it's the other way around. But I'm pretty sure it's much easier for Republicans to get to their guy, relatively speaking, because they only need a majority. Democrats always had these issues because they needed a 2/3 majority. But ultimately, they couldn't get enough of the votes. They couldn't get enough support, which leads to Grover Cleveland basically being the candidate yet again for the Democrats. For the election of 1892. Aldie Stevenson, I think, was his vice presidential candidate. I think the only reason why he was there, primarily and specifically, was because he was someone who wanted silver and was an advocate of silver and pushed it more so than anything else. So it was like, look, we got this gold guy, but if for those people who like silver, you know, we got Aldie Stevenson, you know. Benjamin Harrison ends up being renominated as the Republican nominee. Biggest issue, though, was the fact that Harrison just didn't have a good presidency. Harrison also didn't campaign at all. I forgot who died. But he didn't campaign because of a loved one died. I believe it was his wife. I think Caroline that passed away. Was it his daughter? Someone died, and he couldn't campaign, basically, is ultimately what led to a big reason why votes ended up shifting in the way that it had. And I think Harrison just went back on a lot of the things that he had promised, and that basically just made things very difficult ultimately for Republicans to get back into the positive swing of things for the votes. Here we go. We analyze this. Okay. Sorry about that. Dogs going crazy. Some families home. Whoa. If only I had a soundproof room.
Going to have to fend off another attack from the Fallen. Lilith is relentless in her approach.
So basically, Cleveland becomes the president, and he just goes into a storm of chaos. That's literally the only way that I could probably explain it. The financial realities that were hitting the Harrison presidency ultimately go into Grover Cleveland's, partially because, again, there's no real sufficient standardized monetary policy within the country. And gold was more valuable, but to compensate for the lack of gold was the purchase of silver, and now we had too much silver and not enough gold, and actually creates a collapse within the stock market. It's known as a panic of like 1893. Not good. I'll put it that way. And Cleveland himself was not looked at very fondly. He ended up accepting a bunch of different policies that he would have normally vetoed, but he actually proposed, or it was proposed, at the first real significant income tax rate, which by today's standards was pretty much, if you made more than like the equivalency today of like $150,000, which was like $4,000 back then, a year, you were gonna get taxed. A lot of people were not very happy about that.
We have a friend down. It seems they have brought more friends.
But because of the panic, but because of the financial issues, led to a bunch of labor problems. The railroad strikes, the Pullman strike. Back then it was like, okay, you're gonna work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and the American Railroad was very necessary to the production of and sustainability of the country. This led to them basically putting forth like actual army people to stop the strike, and let's just say, it just became very, very disastrous and destructive. I might want to just do one part on the Pullman strikes because it is very, very, very interesting.
Like being so inconsequential.
Okay, let's just continue this. Upgrade and ability.
You will leave this
Can I
world
interact with this?
alone and forgotten.
Oh, so this is the upgrading the ability.
Stop crying already.
It's good to be back.
Let's talk to Captain Marvel. Okay. He was not looked on fondly, I'll put it that way. Tried to produce and continue the Monroe Doctrine in a lot of ways, very isolationist policies. This is where stuff with Hawaii starts happening, more treaties, Pearl Harbor created, a lot happens in his second term. I'll put it that way. Continuation of the military. Admits quite a few states to the Union too, mind you. Both the Dakotas, Montana, the state of Washington becomes a state. I think the only other real notable thing outside of the destructive nature of the strikes and the economic difficulties around his terms as president, he actually had cancer, which is a crazy story, by the way. They found cancer. It was in his mouth, actually. They were like, okay, this is something malignant, yada yada. They actually had to do this surgery secretly, so like to basically get it out. And they had to remove large portions of his hard palate of his skull. On a boat, mind you, which is crazy. And they basically used the cover story, hey, or what was a tumor specifically, malignant tumor, and they basically removed the part of it and part of his mouth. He had to fill it in with dentures and a false thing, whatever, in his face, and they specifically, isn't that crazy? Just like. He basically, the cover story was like, oh, he's just getting 2 teeth taken out on this boat, and it's like, what? And then it's like, okay, well, he had cancer. Sorry, guys, just letting you know. So, and again, there's no, 25th Amendment or anything at this point, so it's pretty interesting.
I doubt they'll take that beating, but we can always hope.
It's a very contentious second term as president, and most of it really had to do with the financial issues of the country and the health of the country and trying to get people back on their feet and dealing with just real tumultuous economic crises. But at this point, unfortunately for him, because of he wasn't able to turn things around economically, he's now losing a lot of popularity, a lot of vote, and ultimately ends up being forced to basically leave office because it's just he's not going to win. Excuse me. And this leads to him largely just leaving.
There's something dangerous creeping around out here.
Now, he does end up getting nominations as to be a senator, effectively, in future presidential or in future elections, specifically in New Jersey because he's from New Jersey, but ultimately ends up declining. Most of his post-presidency life is basically just helping other presidents kind of figure things out and deal with problems, most notably Teddy Roosevelt. So, sure. And for Teddy, it was like the coal strikes that were happening around that time. Women's suffrage is becoming a systemic issue, and pretty much up until the end of his life. I think he passes away around 1907. Ends up dying, or 1907. He was about 70 when he passed away. I think he died of a heart attack. A lot of things near the end of his life that he does write about or has people write for him about. Things he wish he could have done differently. Very interesting stuff. Now, historically, just a fascinating person, fascinating president, and one that a lot of people have been comparing to the Orange Man today. I don't think it's anywhere near like that. The only real connection is the fact that he has served 2 non-consecutive terms as president. That's basically it. Otherwise, there is no real grassroots push for him to kind of be the guy. It's more just out of convenience he ends up becoming the president twice, really. one who tried to govern conservatively his first term, and then trying to govern conservatively his second term. Basically leaves him doing a bunch of things that go against what he believes in a lot of ways. Although he still tries to hold true to a lot of the things that he is fighting for. A very complicated president. That's just kind of it. A very complicated president. It's tough because I don't know if he's a good or a bad man. I think it's fair to say that he's a very complicated man. And
You picked the wrong one, bud.
that he's a very complicated man with a very complicated legacy of a lot of good and bad. I do believe a lot of the accusations, unfortunately for him, that wait, what am I doing?
Crude, but effective.
Boom. That unfortunately do not help him overall in terms of his historical record and just how people are going to be looking at him. I think even today a lot of people do look at Grover Cleveland, and they don't dismiss the Me Too allegations about him, which I think are pretty fair, to be honest with you. I can't deny them. If anything, the reality is that there's just more evidence than not that stuff probably ultimately did happen. Okay. Well, I will heal myself. But it is undeniable in my personal view that he truly was the last truly conservative Democrat president and pretty much political leader of his time and era. As undeniable he was, and did everything he possibly could to make sure that everything that he did was going to be on the up and up, and really just did what he could.
Might not be up to us, Doc.
And he's also one where it's interesting because this is where Democrats really start changing in a lot of ways. They see where the country's headed, and they try to be pragmatic and smart in terms of their future voter bloc and what's ultimately going to happen with the future of this country. Someone like Woodrow Wilson is going to be coming up pretty soon, and he's going to be a bit of a fire starter within their particular ideas. Republicans were always like the more, let's say, intellectually versed in comparison to their Democrat counterparts, but things really start shifting, Sure. Shot to the heart, and you're too late. Darling, you give love a bad name.
From the rift, her blessing emerges.
I do have to use some strategery here.
Maybe I should be flattered.
Hydra seems quite intent on
Thought that would do
protecting the
more.
podcast. I would think that's a good indicator of its potential value to us.
Or maybe Hydra just doesn't
Why
like us.
why do they have to use the term binary?
Put you up to this, or are you just
I
providing
just
commentary on rumors?
oh
Just
god.
here to make sure no innocent dogs are harmed by this.
Sure. No idea what I'm doing.
You kissed the mother with that mouth?
Okay.
There is
Cute trick.
I think we should talk about the beginnings of Benjamin Harrison while we try and take down Mr. Faustus.
You ever hear the saying, there are no bad dogs, just
What does this mean? Does she have her superpowers now?
I saw a move like that once, centuries ago.
Okay.
Lilith has sent you here to die. I hope you are prepared.
That's a neat trick.
Benjamin Harrison, a Republican president and one whose family does have a very long history, becomes the president in between Grover Cleveland's two non-consecutive terms as the president. A very, very interesting feller. Oof, not good.
It's a little mean, but not any worse than the rest of them.
Yes, maybe it is just scared of unwelcome intruders.
I've yet to hear any other proposals on how we might break
His family is, for those of you who do understand and know a bit of history, Benjamin Harrison is the grandson of William Henry Harrison. I don't think I'm going to do well on this part, but we'll see. Okay. I desperately need to heal my boy.
No half-men.
Nope.
leave some for the rest of us, killer.
I'm hoping I can use this photon beam power. Yeah, just like that.
That must have taken.
Possibly, that's your strength.
We'll have to start.
Looks like they still want a piece.
Hell yeah, player.
Could you maybe hasten your efforts a bit here?
We're the best we can, Doc. Like what you're saying, it ain't a dog.
He's a rather interesting individual historically. Again, the grandson of William Henry Harrison. Never wasn't there during the inauguration, mind you. His father was a politician, and one who is very, very sneaky, kind of like one of these guys who, historically, because of just the namesake alone, gets a lot of recommendations and accommodations just because, well, he's the grandson of William Henry Harrison, a guy who served office for like 30 days but was still a president. Oof.
I am not sure I can keep this up.
Let's just murk this guy. The historical legacy on Benjamin Harrison's not the kindest one. One that is more along the lines of many of the Republicans around this particular point in time. Unfortunately for him, it's just unfortunate that he's the guy that's gonna get. Let me see, knock you back into. Around this particular point in time during the Gilded Age of American history, where they were all about promoting the federal government, promoting all these different acts, and not really doing things necessarily for the betterment of people. The only thing that most people probably praise is that he really did push forth a lot of civil rights acts that helped give black people specifically the rights that were godly given to them. But outside of that, for the most part, most people look at Benjamin Harrison specifically as a failed president in pretty much many ways. Born in Ohio, his family had largely immigrated there at that point. His father was an Ohio State politician. Again, he wasn't there when his grandfather got inaugurated. His family wasn't poor, and they had namesake, but they weren't rich. I mean, most of his early childhood spent is like learning in a log cabin. That's where the school was. A very not well-built part of Ohio. He's born around the 1830s, mind you. So he was about 7 or 8 when his grandfather got inaugurated. He ended up going to a bunch of different colleges and studying a bunch of different things. Again, someone you want to talk about who's prepared to be a politician, it's probably going to be him just for namesake alone. But he goes to like a bunch of different proprietary schools. He's taking college classes at like 12, 13 years old. I think he goes and studies in Miami of Ohio. University. Becomes this big upperclassman kind of fraternity kind of thing. When again, fraternity's something else. Very strange looking dude. I just gotta be honest. If you ever see him when he's younger with pictures with him without his beard, which I'm gonna be honest is I get why he has the beard. I have to respond. Oh, who's at the door?
A pathetic attempt at intimidation. Power of the light.
He does meet. I forgot. I'm gonna go with the fact that Caroline is his wife. But he does meet his future wife. I'm gonna say Caroline. I don't think their children are named Caroline. While in college, her father was also a Presbyterian minister. A lot of Presbyterian ministers up in the Midwest of the United States at this particular point in the Northeast. They basically are given a small plot of land that they can farm, raise children, they get married. He continues studying law at this particular point in time. Eventually, politics starts ringing their head. This is around the very, very early 1850s, by the way. He's like 18, 19 years old when a lot of this happens. Gets into Whig politics from the early get-go. Once the Republican Party is formed, he's largely one of the first people that actually joins up in it, gains a lot of prominence within the Republican Party at a very young age. I think at some point during this particular point in time before the war, trying to hang out.
The first step will be carefully transporting the beast down to the forge. A delicate operation.
This is weird.
Why don't you come back tomorrow before I begin the actual research? Huh?
Pretty nasty. Too bad we can't drink.
Give it time. We get desperate enough, I'm sure someone
I think this is a good point to end after watching a movie that we're not watching. But gets into politics, becomes a very prominent Republican figure in Ohio, eventually moves his family to Indianapolis, Indiana, becomes an influential person there. I think he starts a law firm there. Works with and for the Indiana Supreme Court at that particular point in time. And then eventually joins and becomes a part of the Union Army during the Civil War. I think he's about like 20 when he ends up enlisting. Because he was born around he was born around the same time that Grover Cleveland was born. Early to mid 1830s. Am I tripping?
Are you freaking serious?
No, he would have been
You ratted on us,
he would have been
Hunter.
closer to his late 20s at that particular point in time.
Remove Wanda's corruption. You almost blew the whole plan.
That we didn't watch this movie.
Plan is not blown, Nico. We can still pull this off.
Yeah, but no thanks to you. I tried to do damage control and convince her that we were just talking and not actually.
This game is very weird.
I'm not sure she bought it.
I like it. I also don't like it.
Don't, like,
It's
mention
very
it,
strange.
okay?
Strange mechanics.
Get some beauty rest. If you're gonna save Wanda tomorrow, I need you at the
I don't know. We'll have to just keep playing with it because this is a very,
you
very weird game.
The hunter stalks its prey.
Oh, hey Hunter.
I'm mainly only asking these because I just want to see if it's gonna improve social standing within this game. Maybe get some more experience. Otherwise, I'm kind of just indifferent to a lot of the things that
get away from
are happening in terms of just the interpersonal relationships between the people in this game. It's nothing personal. These are just, I'm just assuming more of, I knew this game was going to be very different. I didn't think it was going to be like this. It's not bad, and I think if you're a big Marvel fan, this is like right up your alley, but it's interesting, I'll put it that way. Some of the character designs are very strange.
Agatha instructed me in multiple postures from the original sutras themselves. I would be happy to show you a few techniques.
Time flies when you're just hanging out, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, Blade, let us do this.
Attack essence.
Now sit down,
Oh.
relax, empty your mind.
Okay, after this part, I'll probably end it here. Because there's a lot about Benjamin Harrison I do want to talk about, but I'd rather have more time to actually do it. He does join the Union Army.
Hey, can I ask a favor?
Are they really that good? I mean, initially he was a part of just recruitment in the early parts of the Civil War. Creates basically a unit in Indiana, and then I think he's actually with Sherman in Atlanta at a certain point when their regiments ultimately combine. But he was mainly just a reconnaissance guy. Doesn't really do too much. Does get and does become eventually in charge of his own brigade at a certain point during the march in Atlanta with William Tecumseh Sherman.
Look, I'm not looking for your deep, dark diary secrets. Don't get freaked out.
I mean, that being said, he does fight within the actual Civil War itself, somewhere in Nashville, I think. He ends up fighting quite a bit, actually, during the Atlanta campaign. One of the few that actually does. He's actually pretty uniquely strategic. He's the kind of guy that gets his troops in the proper positions and then ends up routing the enemy. I mean, he's not like some great military leader, but if you want to have someone who's gonna a volunteer who's gonna rise through the ranks, because at the very least, if you want him to lead like 20 men into a decisive battle, you know, you're not gonna find anyone better than Benjamin Harrison.
Turn you into an empty vessel ripe for possession by non-corporeal entities that lurk in the outer darkness, just waiting for unwitting magical explorers to uncover the wrong bit of knowledge.
Don't read the wrong books. Got it. See? I'm a quick student.
Just let me know when and where, and we will begin.
It's good that we have the kind of relationship.
Now, post-war, during Andrew Johnson's presidency,
Strange about this?
he knows his stuff, but if I came to him to teach me, I'd never hear the end of it. The man loves the sound of his own voice, especially when he's reciting incantations. If you don't mind, can we keep these lessons between you and me?
Do not worry. I will keep my secret to my grave. And beyond.
That's the kind of commitment I like to hear. I knew there was a reason I liked you.
Very well.
During Andrew Johnson's presidency, he's pretty much just a lawyer in Indiana for a lot of this time, but with incredible name recognition. Ulysses S. Grant, when he eventually does become the president of the United States, ends up actually asking him to represent the federal government in a particular case. I think it was specifically like something with treason to be a part of. But yeah, okay. Let's follow Charlie real quick. And then once we follow Charlie, we're gonna... Oh. I mean, I'm running pretty quickly. Oh. I don't... This speed's fine. Alright, I'm gonna stop this here, guys. God bless. Like and subscribe. You all have a good one. Next part coming up soon.
And I told you it is not a dog. Besides, I don't think a cape will be enough.
You wouldn't dare.
My hope is that we can synthesize a facsimile of the Barghest's skin to fool the barrier without harvesting the creature itself.
This really is a bizarre plan, even for you.
If you want to reach the Gamma Accelerator, this is our best and only hope.
More importantly, Doctor, is reaching Wanda. I don't like it, but if the creature must be sacrificed for her...
Having this much demonic energy concentrated on you, Hunter, is not an insignificant risk. I just hope your collar can withstand...
Let me worry about that, Doctor, after you have proven out your plan.
I want an alpha.
The creature is restless. The sooner we start our research, the better.
What happens to the creature after you are finished?
That is up to you.
See that you do not hurt it.
I'll do my best.
I saw you petting it this morning.
You are mistaken. I was taking a blood sample.
Oh, does that require feeding it a fistful of treats?